What up guys, how's it going? I just want to give you a quick tutorial on figuring out whether the shad are spotting or not. One of the biggest things that I've learned is if you work the bank at your lake, and keep in mind you do have to know if you have a population of shad or not. There's some lakes that don't have shad, there's some lakes that do have shad. And then you got to know if the population is healthier. So once you figure that out by research, by just going on the water and talking to maybe local tackle shops and people that are familiar with that lake, and let's say you figure out the lake has a great population of shad, then during this time of the month, right now it's May or June 1st actually, from April, May, June, July, the shad spawn can be happening depending where you are and depending on your lake. So what I like to do is find out where they are. And the key places that you could find these shad while spawning is riprap, your dam, boat launch, boat ramp, or any hard structure that you can find on your lake shallow. So these shad, what they do is congregate near that hard structure and start bouncing off of each other, and that's how they spawn. If you go find those hard structures, whether if it's the dam, the boat ramp, or riprap, go over there, check it out, scan the area with your eyes and polarized glasses and see if you can find balls of shad nearby that are just going crazy. And if you find them, that's a good thing because the bass are nearby. And when I find bass shallow, these are the baits of choice that I would like to throw. But before going into the baits, let's talk about when to target them. So generally on a full moon at nighttime, these shad are spawning like crazy. And this spawn can happen, actually it could extend all the way to August and September, maybe even October, depending where you are. Like the northern lakes, such as Clear Lake, I saw shad spawning, I believe it was in October or September. It was crazy. It was just showers and showers of shad, threadfin shad, up on the bank on riprap and boat ramps. And one of the baits that I like to throw first thing in the morning, the key is to get out there the first, let's say, hour before sunrise. Or if you can get there 2 hours before sunrise, that would be awesome if your lake allows it. Now, I don't recommend breaking into a lake if they're not open a certain time. Just wait till they open the gates. And let's say if it's just half an hour before sunrise, well, you guys got to take advantage of that. So get your boat in the water as soon as possible. Have these baits tied on that I'm going to show you guys right now. And don't waste time. Go to that hard structure and start throwing at them. So my first bait that I would throw is a Whopper Plopper. This bait right here, I've caught so many big fish, and not just during the shad spawn, but at nighttime, post shad spawn, summertime. These bass love the Whopper Plopper. I don't know what it is that sound, especially if you have shad like bouncing against each other and just showering the whole entire surface. This is a good way to create some sort of vibration and noise to get them zoned into your bait, so that way you can catch a big one. So good example of that is Clear Lake. I threw this right next to Konaktai. Wait, was it Konaktai? It was right next to the ferry, right next to a boat ramp, a hard boat ramp. And there was shad everywhere. They were just showering the surface and ripping the surface everywhere, and I could see bass chasing them. But the thing is that I had to get their attention. The only way to get their attention with that large amount of shad spawning is to throw this Whopper Plopper. I like to throw the size 90 or smaller. I like to keep the bait small. Believe it or not, I've caught more big bass on the smaller Whopper Plopper than I have on the bigger ones. I actually haven't caught too many fish on the bigger ones, but I'm sure it works too. If you guys have gizzard shad, I recommend throwing, maybe step it up, maybe throw the 110 or the... Now let's say if the Whopper Plopper is too much, the bait balls are a little bit smaller, You know, they have still a good population, but it's not showering everywhere. What you want to do is maybe pick up your underspin, Cool Baits underspin. Now, since it's not a bass pre-spawn or bass post-spawn environment and the shad are not offshore, I would not recommend going with a 3/8 ounce or ½ ounce. Now, if the shad haven't spawned yet and they're still offshore, you can find them in 20 to 30 to 40 feet, maybe 200 yards off the bank, I definitely recommend a 3/8 ½ ounce underspins cool baits with a natural shad pattern like electric shad or Tackle Warehouse Pearl Blue. Let's say your shad are up shallow. They're on hard structure. What I recommend is throwing closer to an 1/8 ounce, 3/16 of an ounce underspin with a Kitech. Now, you may be asking me like, why am I throwing a shad with a willow blade underneath it? Well, the thing is, I found out that the more attention that you can grab, the better. Because when you see these baits, when you see the bait, I mean, there's thousands of these 3-inch shad. And the best thing that you can do is stick out like a sore thumb. If you stick out like a sore thumb, well, the bass will congregate towards your bait versus these thousands of shad, because honestly, they'll pick off the ones that are probably the biggest ones and causing more of a vibration. Or they're pretty smart. They could, on their lateral line, they could detect if there's a shad that's injured or if there's a bigger bait within the bait ball. But like I said, I like to throw underspins into bait balls because the bass seem to head towards your bait a lot sooner. Usually they're more attracted to your bait if it causes a little bit more vibration than the actual natural bait itself. So yeah, 1/8 ounce, 3/16 of an ounce underspin. You can even go quarter if you want, depending on if they want it slow rolled or if they want it fast. So I would go 1/4 ounce if you want to burn it through the bait, 1/8 ounce if you're trying to slow roll it through the bait. Okay, and the rod and reel setup, I'll get to that probably another video, but it'll be in the description below. What I like to use, just quickly, DC SLX Shimano 7.2 to 1 and a 706 CB Dobbins rod. You can go with the 705 Fury or 704 Fury, or you can go with the Champion rod 706. That will definitely be good enough for your 7 to 10 pounders, even 12 pounders. I imagine that rod will do really well with those bass. So we went over the underspin, the Whopper Plopper. Now you find your shad in tough places that there's weeds, there's standing timber, and it's hard to get your bait in there. I like to go with a buzzbait during those times. The buzzbait, the one thing that it does great is you can throw this in places where, you know, there's weeds, there's standing timber, and etc., where generally you don't want treble hooks in. So if you throw that Whopper Plopper right next to standing timber, sometimes you'll get caught up. Sometimes, you know, you have to take the weeds off and etc. But the buzzbait, what I like about it is that you could throw it to standing toolies next to hard riprap, or you could throw it really shallow or along the docks, and you can have this clank off of anything. And usually, generally, like, you can stay weedless off of it. I like to throw white buzzbait during this time of the shad spawn. Everything I like to throw either chrome or white. Chrome or white. Match the hatch, that's the key. And then rod and reel setup, I'll link below. Generally, I'll throw braid on this setup and something stout with like 65-pound braid with 7.2 to 1 or 8.2 to 1 reel. Now let's say if you see fish busting on bait on the surface, and they're not hitting your Whopper Plopper because it doesn't necessarily match what the shad are doing. And you know, the good thing about the bait that I'm gonna be talking about next is that big bass love this bait, because just imagine a dead shad slowly like a Senko falling back and forth like this. they don't have to chase it down very much. They just can wait and wait until that bait drops down, and then they can just munch it. So this bait I'm talking about is the Zoom Super Fluke. And I like to throw it on a medium rod with a fast action tip, so that way you can really twitch it. The good thing about these flukes is that you could actually work it really slow and methodical. And if you rig it on a Texas rig, hook, 2/0, 3/0, EWG, you can really twitch it like a walking bait. And the good thing about it is that sometimes you could twitch it fast and it'll stay on the top. Sometimes you could twitch it slow and it'll be like a rip bait. Subsurface. If the bass are busting on the shad, then you might want to give this a shot for sure. And I like to usually stick with my natural shad colors. They have some great colors. I'll link them below as well. Maybe your bass are a little bit lethargic due to being post-spawn and being extra hot. So I don't like to talk about degrees necessarily, but around where I saw shad populate in the shallow areas and spawn is around the 74 to 75 degree of water. Let's say the shad are spawning around high 70s, and where the bass are post-spawn, it's hot, they're more lethargic. That's when I'll pick up my slow sink jerk baits, and I'll pick the smaller ones to match the hatch. So 3-inch would be a perfect size. This is a 6 cents. Actually, this is a pointer SP, but I like the slow sink provoke 6 cents jerk bait, and you can really just twitch, pause, twitch, pause, twitch, pause, and really get those fish that are kind of lethargic triggered to actually eat a bait. Sometimes, you know, even if you mash the hatch with the cool baits, Kitech, underspin, and it's ultra realistic, and you mash the hatch, sometimes they need something that just more erratic. And if you go check out Tactical Bassin, they have tons of footage, underwater footage of schools of bass eating rip baits, just erratic movements underwater. That's when I like to throw a jerk bait when they're not absolutely keyed on bait. If I see the bait ball and I see him thrash on bait, my first option would probably be a Fluke or a Kitech underspin. But if you can't really key onto that bait and you just need a cover water, I recommend the jerk bait, the slow sink provoke by 6 cents. My underspin Kitech 1/8 ounce, 3/16 ounce is by far my #1 bait that I would throw. And then it would probably be the Fluke and the Whopper Plopper, honestly. If they're hitting the surface, Whopper Plopper, and you're trying to go for a bigger bite, Whopper Plopper. If you're trying to get 5 fish, definitely trying to work that underspin, cool baits with a Kitech. I like to match the hatch, so if the shad are around 2.8, stick with the 2.8. If they're around 3.3, stick with the 3.3. The shad population around where I live, some do have American shad are quite big, so you probably want to throw like the 5.8, 3.8, but primarily the shad that I'm looking at is around the 2.8, 3.38 area. Thanks for watching the video. If you like what you heard, that'd be great. If you just like the video, please subscribe. If you want to hear more, you know, tips and etc. and tournament results or my tournament journey, I'll have all the rod and reel setups for all these baits in the description. Before I go, the jerkbait rod setup, what I like is selects DC, but right now I have, you know, if you're on a budget and you can't afford a DC reel, I recommend the SLX 8.2 to 1 HG. This will be good enough for your jerk baits and good enough to just reel in that slack while you're doing the ripping. But I have it on the 13 Fishing Green Fate rod. This is the 6.7 medium fast action rod, and I love throwing a jerkbait on this one. Not quite as light as, you know, your premium rods, but it'll do the job. If you stick to these baits during the shad spawn, you'll do just fine. It can be a little bit tricky, you know. First thing in the morning, it is nice to get out there first thing in the morning, early as possible during low light hours, and you know, bite is generally tough when that sun comes up. It's generally tough during this time. So that's why it is crucial. It's super important that you head out towards that riprap, that hard structure, early in the morning, so that way you can take advantage of the shad spawning during that time. Now, it doesn't mean the shad are gonna go away. It doesn't mean the shad is over after the sun comes up. Intermittently throughout the day, shad balls will somewhat stay shallow and roam around maybe in a 20 to 200 yard stretch. At one point, they'll be in a cove on hard structure, really shallow, and bass will be busting on them maybe every 10 minutes. And then you go and you leave and then you come back and they'll be 20 yards or 25 yards down to the left. They move. So what you want to do is during that time is intermittently just come back to that bait ball and try to find them, because think of the bank is similar to a neighborhood street, right? So the cul-de-sac is your cove and the shad were at the cul-de-sac, but you know, they wanted to go down the block and hit up the friend's shop. But as they went down the block, some gangsters, the bass, decides to mob a few of them. So just think about as that. The bait will congregate down the block here and there. So they'll start off the cul-de-sac, maybe first thing in the morning. Maybe they'll go down the riprap, down the block where there's a 6-pounder. So you don't want to just give up on a bait ball right away. Give it some time. So maybe first thing in the morning they have like 1, 2 pound, 3 pound bass in the cul-de-sac, but maybe let's say a half a block down, 6 or 7 pounder might be munching on them, and they push the bait towards that section. Or maybe the wind picked up and the wind just pushed them in that area. So even if you can't get out during the morning time, you still want to give it a shot. You still want to go out there and still focus on the shad, because wherever there's bait, there's bass. Anyways, this is Double Digit Angler. Check it out.